The new Genshin Impact 4.5 banner brings us Chiori and Itto, as well as Neuvillette and Kazuha in the second phase. So you might be wondering, who should I pull for, or should I maybe skip this banner entirely? Well, I'm so glad you're here, because in this video we're going to talk about exactly that. In fact, we're going to go over each and every one of these four, talk about what they can do, how strong they are, which teams they synergize well with, and also how free-to-play friendly they are, so you can make the best decision possible on if they would be good for your personal account or not. And what's more, we'll also go over the 4-star characters, weapon banner, and, most importantly, the all-new Chronicle Wish. Quite a lot on the list, so let's jump right into it. Starting out with our brand new lady from Inazuma, the lovely Chiori. Before we go into her kit and what she can do, I just want to note that please take whatever I'm about to say about Chiori with a grain of salt. Since Chiori is a brand new character and we haven't gotten our hands on her actual gameplay firsthand, all we can say at this point in time about her is solely based on the dev livestream that happened a couple days ago. So before you pull for her, please wait until the first Genshin creators out there got their hands on her and make an actual release review. However, with that out of the way, what can Chiori do? Chiori is a Geo character, and from what it sounds like, she will probably be an off-field DPS. The main part of her kit seems to be her elemental skill, which summons a little puppet called Tomoto on the battlefield who will then start attacking the enemies alongside with your current on-field character. Tomoto will stay on the field even if you switch Chiori out. And if there are Geo constructs on the battlefield, then you will get a second Tomoto, potentially doubling your DPS. What exactly her burst will do was actually not that much clear from the dev livestream. However, from my personal opinion, it kinda looks like one of these big bada boom bursts that deal one big damage number, kind of a bit like Eula's, for example. Also, what's very interesting to note is, apparently Chiori is as well able to get Geo Infusion for her normal and charged attacks, which kinda raises the question that if she is an off-field character, why would she need a Geo Infusion on her normal and charged attacks? So this might be a teensy tiny little hint on her being able to both on and off-field, like for example Yae Miko. How exactly the numbers will look like, of course, we can only tell after she's released, and we've seen some first-hand gameplay footage of her. Now, usually I would now talk about how strong the character is and how much damage potential Chiori would bring to your personal account. But obviously, since she isn't released yet and we haven't yet seen any specific damage numbers, I cannot give you any information of that right now. However, what we can talk about is her free-to-play friendliness regarding her weapon selection. Chiori's damage is going to scale both with your attack and your defense, so both attack and defense options are probably good weapons, even though it should be noted that her signature weapon scales with defense, meaning probably defense will be the favorable stat on her. And her being a sword character and potentially mostly scaling on defense brings one problem with it, and that is that her best in slot weapon, besides of course her 5-star signature, would be the Festering Desire or the Cinnabar Spindle, which are both exclusive event weapons that if you haven't gotten them back in the day, you will never be able to get them. By the way, in my Chiori analysis, for some reason I kind of thought that the Cinnabar Spindle would be a craftable weapon, so forgive me for that misconception. Of course, they are both event exclusive, so that brings the unique problem for Chiori that if you don't have these two, and you don't want to go for her signature weapon, pretty much the best thing you can go for is the Wolf's Fang from the Battle Pass, and if you're completely free to play, then I think the Harbinger of Dawn, which is a 3-star weapon, is one of the best choices, however, still providing a much lower damage output. So keep this one in mind in case you want to go for Chiori and you absolutely like her. You'll either have to have one of these exclusive event weapons, invest even more wishes into getting her signature, or simply be fine with the fact that you're gonna run a 3-star or subpar 4-star option on her, which naturally translates into much lower damage. Now, finally, we would also talk about Chiori's team options right now. However, I would prefer to talk about Itto first because, as we will see, both Chiori and Itto kinda sorta have the same team flexibility and same team options. So let's go over her banner colleague Itto first, and then we'll talk about the team options for both of them. Alright, time to talk about Itto, the man, the legend from Inazuma. Itto is a Geo Claymore on-field DPS, and he is an absolute hypercarry, meaning if the man is not on the field, then the man is pretty much doing nothing at all. His playstyle can be summed up pretty quickly by saying a caveman go boink with his big club. Like, that's pretty much it. What you're gonna do is you activate your burst to infuse your attacks with Geo, and then you start normal and charge attacking while you're being in that burst state. In between, you can use your skill to deal some additional damage, but that is pretty much it. With the right weapon, team, and artifact combo, this can lead to quite the impressive damage numbers, even though he is quote-unquote just a Geo character, Geo being obviously one of the weaker elements in the game. So yeah, his kit is very simple and straightforward, and his damage potential is not outstanding, but still more than good enough to 36-star the Abyss if you pair him up with the right team. And speaking about teams, let's finally go into this right now, talking about both him and Chiori. See, pretty much every Geo character, apart from maybe Yunjin as a buffer and Zhongli as the best shielder in the game, Geo characters like to stay among themselves. Geo characters mostly prefer to be in a mono Geo team, meaning all the characters in the team will be of the Geo element, and certainly Itto and Chiori are no exception to that. In fact, Itto is the standard on-field character for a mono Geo team. Usually, you would play Itto with Goru as a buffer, Albedo as a sub-DPS who is off-field, and then in the fourth slot you will probably use Zhongli to give you a bit of shielding, and that has always been the standard mono Geo team. Now, since with the new patch we're going to introduce Chiori to the mix, this will change a little bit, because Chiori will also be a sub-DPS just like Albedo before, and maybe, depending on how her damage numbers will look after release, she might also have on-field capability, meaning there might be a little bit of swapping in and out that will be possible with Chiori. One option would be, if her on-field damage is pretty good, we could actually swap out Itto and then use Chiori as her on-field DPS while doing off-field damage at the same time, or if you don't have Albedo, you could use Chiori as your Albedo replacement, but you could also go for a more risky mono-Geo team where you swap out Zhongli for Chiori, giving you even more damage in the team, with Itto, Albedo, and Chiori being 3 damaging characters, just that you have to deal with the fact that you lose the shield from Zhongli. So yeah, when it comes to team flexibility and team options for both Itto and Chiori, all I can say is the flexibility in their teams is basically nothing, because both of them want to be in a mono Geo team, but if you already have some Geo characters and you're interested in building a mono Geo team, then this banner with Itto and Chiori will be an absolute godsend, because you can stock up on a lot of Geo power for your ideal mono Geo team. So now that we know what's going on with the teams for both Chiori and Itto, let's quickly go back to Itto and also talk about his free-to-play friendliness, because in contrast to Chiori, he is quite a bit more free-to-play friendly. Of course, when it comes to weapons, his Redhorn Stone Thresher, his signature weapon, will be his best in slot. What a surprise, right? But you might already have a Wolf's Gravestone from the standard banner, so if you have that, that's amazing, works pretty well on him. Besides that, if you now and then buy the Battle Pass, you might have the Serpent Spine, which is also an excellent greatsword on him. And if you're purely free to play, not investing a single cent, then you can always go and craft the White Blind, which is a craftable greatsword, and it is surprisingly good for a free to play weapon on Itto, so you can absolutely play him as your on-field DPS, not spending a single wish on any weapons. However, there is one thing that I absolutely must mention when it comes to both Itto and Chiori, and that is that both of these characters are from Inazuma. So if you're still quite new in the game and you haven't progressed in the story that much, then getting the materials that you need to upgrade those characters will be pretty much impossible, because they will also naturally require materials from Inazuma, and Inazuma is the only part of the map in the game that you physically cannot access if you haven't unlocked it via the story just yet. Also, I would be super happy if you could maybe drop the video a like, because it helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm, so big cheers for your support. But now, let's go on with the 4-star characters that will accompany Itto and Chiori on their banner. Now, when it comes to the 4 stars for the first phase, for the Itto Chiori phase, we haven't gotten any official information yet. However, we have some relatively reliable leaks that say we're gonna have Goru, Yunjin, and Xingqiu on this banner as 4 stars. And should this really be the case, then this would be huge, because Goru as a Geo buffer is an absolute must-have character for every mono Geo team. If you don't have him, you can basically not play mono Geo. So if you've ever been interested in building yourself a Mono Geo team, this banner, as I previously mentioned, is an absolute godsend. You get Itto as your on-field DPS, you get Chiori as potentially a great sub-DPS, and as a 4-star, you also get Goro, who is a must-have for that team too. So you're getting basically an entire team in just one banner. About Yunjin, while not being technically a must-have for a Mono Geo team, she is a nice off-field buffer, and just in case you didn't know, Xingqiu is one of the best 4-star characters in the entire game, having countless different team options where he fits in really nicely, so getting him sooner or later is an absolute must for every account, and if you have him already, maybe you can get some constellations on him with this banner. However, please do not pull on this banner just for Xingqiu. If you don't like Mono Geo, then please do not pull for Itto or Chiori at all. These two characters are only good for Mono Geo teams, and if you don't want that, then don't pull, don't build pity on this banner, skip the first phase entirely. So much for the first phase of the banner with Chiori and Itto. Let's now go on with the second phase featuring Neuvillette and Kazuha, starting out with the man from Fontaine, Monsieur Neuvillette himself. Just like Itto, Neuvillette is an on-field DPS, and he does not do anything if he's not on the field. His element is Hydro, and he is incredibly strong, all while at the same time being very simple to play and understand. The way it works is actually pretty simple. His skill does some AoE Hydro damage, and his burst does some more AoE Hydro damage and some more AoE. Both the skill and the burst drop those little blue spheres called source water droplets. They will be on the field, and what they're good for is, if you charge his charge attack, which is the main part of his kit by the way, this is like a big huge Kamehameha water ray that he shoots out, and it deals massive tons of damage. However, the charge up time for this charge attack is really long, and you need to have those source water droplets from the skill and the burst near you to drastically speed up this charging process, so you can basically keep on shooting your charge attack and deal massive damage. That is pretty much all you need to do. And as I just mentioned, Neuvillette is an absolute monster when it comes to the damage numbers that the man is pulling off. Please don't get me wrong, I don't want to bash Ayato or Child, but Neuvillette, in my opinion, is the very best Hydro DPS in the entire game. If you do not have a Hydro on-field DPS character on your account just yet, then I would at least consider maybe giving Neuvillette a go. When it comes to team flexibility, we have the typical Hydro syndrome, which means if you're Hydro, you pretty much synergize with everything. You can play him in a Bloom-based team with pretty much every Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, Bloom, whatever constellation you can even think of. You can play him in a Vaporized team, maybe with Shangling. He loves being in an Electrocharge team, specifically with the Eye Miko. And some people even went so far to only take him and no teammates at all into the Spiral Abyss and did pretty well with just that. So yeah, when it comes to team flexibility, no matter if you're a free-to-play player or a spender, Neuvillette will always work with pretty much whatever you have in stock. Just keep one thing in mind, since he attacks with his charge attack mostly and not with his normal attacks, characters like Fischl or Beidou, who only attack with you in sync, if you're using normal attacks and not with charge attacks, they will not work so well with Neuvillette. Since Neuvillette has that much of a team flexibility, that already means he is a good option for free-to-play accounts because he synergizes well with so many different characters. Also, there are some free-to-play options for weapons that work nicely on him, though I need to say that the Tome of the Eternal Flow, his signature weapon, that is by far his best in slot, with his second best weapon being the Sacrificial Jade, aka a Battle Pass weapon, so you also have to pay a bit if you want to have that, meaning that to unleash his very true absolute maximum damage potential, you might at least have to invest $10 for one battle pass to get the Sacrificial Jade. And last, but definitely not least, let's talk about Kazuha, the de facto Anemo Archon, because he is just that much of a super duper powerful character that he even trashes the actual Anemo Archon Venti. Let's jump into him. With his skill, Kazuha pulls in nearby enemies and also performs a plunging attack which deals significant amounts of damage while at the same time swirling elements. This is the best grouping ability in the entire game. And as if that's not enough, his Elemental Burst swirls elements in a decent AoE for a continuous period of time, so whoever is in that AoE will constantly have all different types of elements applied to them just from the swirl. This not only makes him perfect for boosting elemental reactions, but also for shredding enemies' elemental resistance through the Viridescent Venerer set. All in all, when it comes to power, Kazuha is one of the best characters in the entire game. And if you're talking about must-pull units, then Kazuha is pretty much on every list because he's just that incredibly good. And I can't help myself but continue giving him props because also his team flexibility is absolutely incredible. Since he is an Anemo character who mainly swirls around all different types of enemies, as long as you're not running Dendro or Geo, elements that cannot be swirled, whatever you're doing, no matter if Taser Team, Vaporize, Melt, Reverse Melt, Kazuha always works phenomenally great because he just helps swirl around whatever you bring to the party already. All you really need to do is build him with as much elemental mastery as you can, since elemental mastery helps with the swirl reaction damage, and then you can enjoy all the big damage numbers. That's as simple as it gets. The very cool thing about this is that since he wants to have a lot of elemental mastery, you also want to give him a weapon that has elemental mastery on it, and while he probably comes with the Freedom Sworn again, which is kinda like his signature weapon, you absolutely do not have to go for this. Don't get me wrong, it's a great weapon and it also works on Kuki Shinobu, by the way, if you want to build her for a Hyper Bloom team. But when it comes to Kazuha, what you can do is you can just craft the Iron Stinger, which is a 4-star sword, and that already brings a sizable amount of elemental mastery on it with its substat. So yeah, Kazuha is not only one of the quote-unquote must-pull characters in the game, he is also super flexible with the teams and has a lot of free-to-play value because one of his de facto best weapons in the game is the craftable 4-star sword. So what do you want more? The only situation where I could see that Kazuha might not be the ideal choice would be if you use a ranged character as a main DPS, like for example Yoimiya, and you don't necessarily want to pull all the enemies directly in front of your face. But, since most characters in the game are melee characters anyway, Kazuha is the best Anemo character for pretty much every elemental reaction team. Unfortunately, when it comes to the 4-star characters that will be on the Neuvillette Kazuha banner, it's still too early at this point to really be able to tell anything, so let's skip over that for now and rather look at the 5-star weapons that come in the 4.5 banners. Alright, so the 5-star weapons that will come in Genshin 4.5. On the first half, we have the Uraku Mizugiri, which is going to be the signature for Chiori, and the Red Horn Stone Thresher, which is Itto's signature. Since the Uraku Mizugiri, just like Chiori, is a brand new item, unfortunately we haven't been able to take a look at the exact weapon description. All we do know is that it's going to have a defensive scaling on the substat, therefore also the theory that Chiori will probably scale a bit more with defense than with attack. If you like Chiori, this is going to be the best weapon for you. However, since it does have a defense substat, the amount of characters that can actually make use of this weapon will be quite limited. Actually, the only other character that will really like this weapon would be Albedo, in case you already have him, because also he is a sword character and mainly scales with defense. As for the Red Horn Stone Thresher for Itto, I already talked briefly about it in the Itto section. It's not that necessary to get this weapon because you might already have the Wolf's Gravestone. If you have that, just use that. You could use the Serpent Spine from the Battle Pass or just craft yourself the White Blind, which is also, while not being his best in slot obviously, a very good choice. However, if you want to build a good mono Geo team, then what you could do is just wish on one of these two weapons on the banner, and if you win the 50-50, cool, but if you lose the 50-50 to the other respective weapon on the banner, then that should not be that much of a problem, because you could also make use of that. As it stands, for the weapons, it's pretty much going to be the same thing as for the characters in the first phase. If you want to build a strong mono Geo team, then dump all your Primo Gems and Fates into this banner because it's going to have extremely high value. But if you're not interested in mono Geo, then it's a complete skip. Save your wishes for something else. Now, for the weapons in the second phase, we have the Tome of the Eternal Flow, which is Neuvillette's signature, and probably the Freedom Sworn, which is going to be the one for Kazuha. As I just said in the Kazuha part, you don't really need the Freedom Sworn, don't get me wrong, it's a great sword, but you could always make do with the Iron Stinger, and that works just fine. In my opinion, especially on Kazuha, if you want to vertically invest into him, you should get his second constellation before even thinking about giving him his signature weapon. As for the Tome for Neuvillette, it's a bit different. If you're somebody who regularly spends on the Battle Pass, then you might as well get the Sacrificial Jade and even some refinements for the Sacrificial Jade. However, if you're not a Battle Pass buyer, then kind of like your options are a bit more limited. If you really like Neuvillette and you don't have any other specific characters that you're die-hard saving for, then thinking about giving him his signature weapon might not be that much of a bad idea. Just whatever weapon you might decide to go for, keep in mind, weapon banners can eat tons and tons of Primo Gems because you're not very likely to get the weapon of your choice right away. So, as I always say, if there are still characters out there that you definitely want to have, go for those characters first and only start wishing for weapons once you have all the 5-star characters that you really need for your account. But now that we're already talking about characters that you really need for your account, right? Let's also take a look at the brand new addition that is going to be introduced to Genshin with 4.5, which is the Chronicle Wish, a brand new, totally different banner that could be very interesting for you. Let's check it out. Alright, so first of all, what even is the Chronicle Wish? The Chronicle Wish is a new banner that is being introduced to Genshin in 4.5, which features weapons and characters that haven't been on the limited time event banner for quite some time, or that are usually on the standard banner. For the first Chronicle banner that we're going to have in the 4.5 patch, we're going to have Eula, Mona, Albedo, Klee, Diluc, and Jean as the 6 available 5-star characters, and a whole lot of 5-star weapons, mostly from the Mondstadt region. Now, let's go quickly over how exactly this works. Just like with the weapon banners up until now, what you do is you select one item that you want, for example, one 5-star character or one 5-star weapon, and then you start wishing towards that item. In case you then lose your 50-50 on that wish, what the developer said is that the 5-star item that you're gonna lose the 50-50 for will have the same type as the item that you were wishing for. So if you were wishing for one of the 5-star characters, if you lose your 50-50, you at least gonna get another 5-star character, and if you were wishing for a 5-star weapon, you're at least gonna get another 5-star weapon for that. Also, unlike the weapon banner, you only need one fate point, aka only one failed 50-50 until you get your guaranteed 5-star that you were wishing for. As we remember, on the weapon banners, you have to get 2 of these fate points before you're finally able to get the guarantee for the weapon of your choice. So at first glance, that might sound nice because it's technically less investment needed for your guaranteed 5-star. However, there is one big problem with that. See, while for character banners, your 50-50 status and your pity do carry over to the next banner, for the Chronicle Wish, if you lose your 50-50 and you get one fate point, and you don't manage to continue pulling to guarantee your 5-star, and the next Chronicle banner comes up, that fate point that you already have will be completely lost. So what you gotta keep in mind is, if you pull on the Chronicle banner, you either have to have enough wishes stored to guarantee your 5-star, or you have to be able to live with the fact that you get a fate point and you lose that on the next one. So much for how it works. But now, looking at the characters and the weapons, is there anything interesting here? Well, in case you like Mono Geo and you want to build your super duper Mono Geo team, then this is again a great option because they do have Albedo here. As for the other 5 characters and all the weapons, I would say if you're not going for Chiori or Itto, like if you want to skip the whole Geo part of the 4.5 banner entirely, then you either have the chance to, of course, save your wishes, but if you don't want to save these wishes and you want to pull for something, then the Chronicle banner might be a nice option for that. As for which of these weapons and which of these characters you should pull for specifically, I don't really have anything to say here because this is completely up to your personal preference. I'm just gonna say, keep in mind, you might have to invest a lot of wishes on this to get your guaranteed 5-star, so if you're saving up for maybe Farina or some of the other characters that are still gonna come, you might want to be careful with spending all your wishes on this right now. And if you now want some more infos on the brand new character Chiori, then absolutely don't miss my in-detail analysis on her right here. I wish you all the best of luck with your polls, may you get the character you want, we see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, travel smart.